against that foolishness. How to implement it well is not answered by that general principle, and each context varies in terms of what it would require to do it well. A few of the principles which have been enunciated and are mostly familiar to you. Participatory democracy is what the most ardent, perhaps, advocate. Each person speaks for herself. The great thing about that is participation actually does build competence. Also, cognitive capacity comes from interactions and speaking and learning. However, it's much better suited for small localities such as New England town meetings than it is for national governments, and one shudders to think how it would be applied in a global democratic civilization. Representative democracy was Madison et al.'s way of attempting to adapt that kind of small Athenian democracy to the conditions of a nation state. And they got some things brilliantly well, and some things are left gaping holes. They did figure out how to transfer authority from one leader to the next. A great achievement in historical perspective. However, we now take it for granted and we want to know what's next. They also found that by forcing legislators and executive to negotiate, they could prevent the most damn fool schemes sometimes from getting passed, simply because they couldn't form a governing majority who would buy into the foolishness. A great achievement also, but probably not enough to run a global technological civilization. We have to do better than simply knocking off some of the worst schemes. What will allow that to happen is the question that I pose to you and that I pose to myself as I go about my work as a 21st century political scientist, hoping for the 22nd to arrive before humans undermine themselves and their planet. Associative democracy, some people say, is the key. Bring to individual institutions such as universities, churches, environmental organizations, greater participation and interaction by the members. Don't allow the professionals to run it the way Sierra Club is run these days. Sierra Club has never published an article on the fact that it's possible to redesign chemicals to make them inherently benign. Sierra Club is interested in wilderness preservation and its similar activities, which is great, but it's not necessarily responsive to what some of us environmentalists would like to see as a priority, or at least as a full set. We have no say in the Sierra Club's agenda because it's run by professionals. Roughly the same goes of most institutions, in accord with what Michel's a century ago clarified as the iron law of oligarchy. Even democratic organizations like labor unions get taken over by seasoned professionals. How to prevent that in a university, in a labor union, in an environmental organization, wherever one looks, that problem arises. Think the Democratic Party. Workplace democracy is another response to the shortcomings of national level representative democracy. The most famous political scientist who's ever lived, Robert Dahl, has written a book on the subject to which I commend you. Roughly, workers hire managers instead of vice versa. There is no reason in principle why that could not happen, but it is unthinkable by most of us most of the time up till now. Will it remain so? Hard to say. Workers' cooperatives in Mondragon, Spain, catalyzed by a Catholic priest, suggest that it may not forever be impossible or beyond human capacity. Whether or not it can be made feasible in the sense of being acceptable broadly, it's hard to say. Finally, deliberative democracy is a catch-all phrase which has been applied to numerous reforms which would make contemporary institutions somewhat more discussion-oriented, somewhat less bureaucratic and prone to impose, somewhat more likely to ask and inquire. The most concrete of such example is a book by Bruce Ackerman, a Yale law professor, and Jim Fishkin, a Stanford political scientist. It's called Deliberation Day. Simply a proposal for a holiday once every 4 years in which people get off work and use the time to actually meet with each other and talk about important issues. It's a tepid reform, clearly, but it's doable. Regrettably, the non-tepid reforms appear undoable. Whether or not that set will expand so that the doable ones become less tepid and so on is hard to say. In summary, there is a potential intelligence of democracy which deserves to be applied just about everywhere. In the home, it happens when a child comes in with an idea which is inconvenient for a parent. Among spouses, it occurs when the two have different ideas and each is sure that she is right. In universities, you already know about it. I don't have to tell you. We do not have democracy in our bones, whether it's as parents or as spouses or as faculty and administration and students. Our immediate reaction tends to be to reiterate our point of view, or if we have the power, to impose our ideas, not to inquire and negotiate. That need not be forever beyond human competence as far as I can tell, but it certainly is a stretch for most of us and most of our institutions today. Thank you. If the Faculty Senate were doing its job, one of the things it would be looking into is the marginalization of students out of governing the matters that directly affect them, such as the quality of teaching. The ratio of women to men students on campus should have been a fighting issue decades ago. It would have been had the Faculty Senate taken seriously the environment and